More details?
Some answers to some profound questions that still baffle Christian theologians and bishops of the highest order. For example, the problem of suffering, the problem of evil in the world. Christians basically have this idea that God is very, very loving. And you think, well, why are people dying of cancer? What about earthquakes? I actually heard the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, talking about this, and he has no answers. I find that frustrating, because if only, I mean, I don't mind if he nicks it from the Quran. I mean, there are answers
what is the answer
in Islam to these real answers to do with the nature of our life on earth and the character of God, and the life being a test and a trial, and the afterlife and the reward. Many answers.
You don't have that in
Christians don't use any of this material.
Well, thank you.
He said Christians. That is the okay. I thought.
I'm sorry. I was really waiting on, I thought he was about to say the alternative. Like, Christianity doesn't have an answer, but here in Islam we find this. I was waiting.
This is, I mean, as dumb as everything else he said was. This takes the talk. This is my field in philosophy. Wow. I had to read pretty much every relevant thing on the problem of evil ever written. You do have Muslims who have written on the problem of evil, but. What's this guy even talking about? Yeah. Like the people dealing with the problem of evil at the philosophical level, they're overwhelmingly Christians.
Forget C.S. Lewis. Forget about him.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, like the people who are actually dealing with the most sophisticated arguments. Like I did my entire doctoral dissertation on the Bayesian argument from evil. It's the most sophisticated version of the argument from evil. But it's interesting because, you start off with the sort of history of the argument. For centuries, the main version of the argument was the logical version of the argument from evil, which is, if you believe that there is an all-powerful, all-knowing, perfectly good being, then evil cannot exist. But evil does exist. And therefore, if you believe in this perfect being and in evil, you've got a contradiction in your thinking. No one at the philosophical level uses that anymore because it was destroyed by a Christian philosopher named Alvin Plantinga. He destroyed it so thoroughly. And keep in mind, he didn't destroy the problem of evil. You still wonder, hey, my goodness, look at all this stuff that happens. Why does so much stuff happens? He destroyed that version of the argument, and then people shifted, the atheists and critics and so on, shifted to what's called an evidential version, that the amount of evil in the world is some kind of evidence against the existence of God. How much is going to depend on what kind of argument you have. And then Christian philosophers responded with what's called skeptical theism. And now even the people who were defending the that evidential version later rejected it and say that's a bad argument. And so they came up with a Bayesian argument, a Bayesian version of the argument. So it's Christian philosophers who are dealing with these arguments.
Yeah.
And so right now he's just in fantasy land. Oh, Islam has all these answers. The only thing you could say where Islam might have some advantage when it comes to the problem of evil is that Allah is not perfect, right? The problem of evil arises most clearly when you're talking about a being who is perfect in power, perfect in knowledge, and perfect in goodness. Allah doesn't love people all that much, doesn't care a whole lot about people. His justice isn't perfect. So you can just say, hey, this is a messed up God. This is a defective, limited God. Of course, the amount of suffering.
This is what you would expect. This is what you would expect from an Allah.
Yeah, this is what you would expect with a sloppy, Aladdin-like deity.
So he says that.
What was the genie's name? Was it just called Genie in Aladdin?
Yeah, just Genie.
Genie. He says that Christianity doesn't have an answer to that issue, to the problem of evil, but Islam somehow has. And then he gives the most basic. No, he just basically did. But
he basically says what tons of Christians say in response.
He says what the most basic response is from that you can hear from. I don't know, from average Christians who don't go very deeply into it. And it doesn't answer anything at all if he talks about it from his level. He just repeats whatever other people say as well. How is that a proper response? I mean, I ask you, what exactly is the answer in Islam to, I don't know, why did Allah create this group of people and inflicted extreme suffering upon them, despite them being, all kinds of different religious groups, some of them right according to Islam, some of them not right according to Islam. Why do they exist? Why do they suffer so much? Especially despite the fact that their afterlife and everything has already been determined, and all of it, is decided by Allah in real time. I mean, I feel like he doesn't understand the problem of evil, or he oversimplifies it and thinks, we have an answer because life is a test. That's it. But that doesn't even begin to answer the basic levels of the problem. But maybe he will say more about it. I don't know.
Yeah, and that was just disastrous. I mean, everything that's relevant that can be said about the problem of evil, you find it. So you can go to Christian philosophers and so on. There you find theodicies. They're one way of responding to the problem of evil. That God can use evil things that happen to achieve certain goods that you can't achieve without problems in the world. So you've got that. You've got skeptical theism. Skeptical theism is the claim that God is so far beyond us in knowledge that why would you think that you would even be aware of God's reasons for allowing various things? Then you have specifically those are philosophical responses, but then you have specifically religious responses, which involve things like, what are you talking about? We're sinners. We're sinners in a sinful world. And so why are you expecting a hedonistic paradise for people who are under God's judgment? So then you could go on to say, well, why do even Christians suffer if they've been forgiven? But think, if God somehow removed any sort of suffering once you become a Christian, what happens? Then people would become Christian just because now nothing bad ever happens to me, and so on. And then you have my goodness, you have going all the way to sort of the pinnacle of Christianity. With Jesus dying on the cross and then rising from the dead, the takeaway is God takes something that looks like the worst thing that ever happened. This would be God becoming a man and then being tortured and killed by his creation. That would be the worst thing that ever happened, and yet somehow becomes the greatest thing that ever happened. And so why would you not think that God brings good out of all this evil when he did it right there? And so you've got more responses to this, but the point is, this is what in the name of common sense is he's talking? He's talking to Muslims. A primarily Muslim audience here for this channel, and saying, yeah, Christians, they don't have answers for this, but in Islam, I'm not going to tell you what they are. Right. Hint, which would be the same thing, which would be a lot of the same things that Christians say. But trust me, bro. This is the source of trust me, bro, in the book of the Council of Nicaea. You know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of Yusuf Estes, when he shares his testimony. He's like, so I was talking to a Muslim, and the Muslim was saying, what proof do you have for God? And I said, proof? Christians don't believe in proof. We just believe in faith. And so the Muslim said to me, but we can prove Islam. And what is proof? And the Muslims are going, oh, well, that's how things are. I'm sitting there thinking, guys, again, in philosophy, who are the people arguing for the existence of God? To be fair, you have Muslims, you have Jews, but guys, the overwhelming majority of people who are known for coming up with awesome arguments for the existence of God are Christians. And so you look at that and you just say, who is that meant for? What you're saying, who's that meant for? It's meant for your Muslim audience to feel better about their religion without actually having to go out and do the work, which is being done by Christians. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Benjamin here says, hey, David, loved your video on the Quran containing fables. It's Muslims saying that it contains fables. Muslim scholars saying that it contains fables. Hey, look at this. He's saying you got to go with what scholars say about the Bible. His own Muslim scholars say the Quran's filled with fables. I've tried reading the Quran, but it was very hard to read. It's very disorganized, and it's not clear on much of the things it talks about. Yeah, Benjamin, that's why when people ask me if they should read the Quran, I normally recommend, unless you just have world champion attention span and you can sit there and read completely disorganized nonsense, I normally recommend reading it topically. So look up, think of a topic you're interested in, look up all the passages on that topic, because the Quran is
if it makes you feel any better, Muslims don't read it because they find it painful too.
That's true. Antony Flew, speaking of philosophers, Antony Flew, the great skeptic of the 20th century, said to read the Quran is to do penance. That's where you punish yourself for your sins.
It is.
All right, let's watch some more of this here.
I wouldn't mind if they just borrowed it, but there are also other
I wouldn't mind just if they borrowed the responses, the brilliant responses that are in Islam that I won't mention. Hey, Paul, if you ever want to come and talk to us and explain what the Muslim responses to the problem of evil are that are way better than the Christian responses, love to see that anytime. My channel open.